Hi, this is Paul. This morning on Twitter, someone sent me a list of tweets. We're connected with other tweets. You know how Twitter works. Someone responding to a drawing of Michaela astride the Wall Street bull, something like linkage to the Book of Revelation, kind of selectively cropped the photo so that Michaela's Instagram comment underneath was just that she thought this was kind of funny. But it kind of launched the Jordan Peterson is a grifter, Jordan Peterson's a hater, blah, 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 blah. And then the small account, which is now locked, tweeted out, "Hate to break it to y'all, but Jordan's not coming back. It seems likely he and his family stepped into something that most of us only fearfully speculate and theorize about." There's a degree of truth to that, and usually if just it's a very small account, been around a while, it looked like nothing, no reason to believe that this person had any insider information about Jordan or anything like that. But it's interesting how when you speak to something that's out there in the zeitgeist, how it gets picked up. And that's just the way groups of people are. And I think in some ways, for the number of people for whom Peterson really shook up their world and helped them and improved their world, this tweet just spoke to their fear. Jordan's not coming back. He's not coming back from this. Now, the court of public opinion, again, is always the court of public opinion. Jordan Peterson is a hater. Jordan Peterson was a grifter. He's in it for money. This tweet showed up in one of the streams that was around this. Peterson never believed any of it. That's why he was selling it. Truth is free. Look at his past work at the UN, his massive collection of communist art, his daughter, and his own condition for the efficacy of his self-help. I look at these things and they don't ring true to me. Everything I saw from Peterson, whether agree or disagree with his actions or his statements, never struck me as a grifter at all. I don't begrudge him the money he made. No one forced anyone to buy his books or to support him on Patreon. I just didn't strike me as deceptive. My read has always been that he's sincere, and the center of his mission was to help individuals. He was a clinical psychologist. That was part of he's had an interesting mix of things that he's done over his life, and if anything, he seemed sincere that he really wanted to help individual people, and that came through again and again in just multiple conversations that I've had with people. I've had, just by virtue of having this little YouTube channel, I've had lots of conversations with a lot of individuals that had known him before he hit it big. Just listen to Jonathan Peugeot. Jonathan Peugeot is a stand-up guy. I've not seen anything. Again, with people's ideas and opinions, go ahead and feel free to debate or vary, but I've never seen anything but honesty coming out of Jonathan Peugeot, and Jonathan knew him, before all this craziness. And again, when my sister died unexpectedly, Jordan sent me a note, just a little note. Jordan did not have to do that. Jordan did, the little section of my channel is nothing compared to the numbers of people that follow Jordan Peterson. I remember when his book tour came to Sacramento, a bunch of us from the meetup went, and 3,000 people go to the event, and our little meetup has usually a couple of dozen people and maybe a couple hundred people on the mailing list. But Jordan Peterson did not need to take time out to send me a condolence note about the death of my sister. That's not the act of a grifter. I'm not that important to Jordan Peterson's business future. There'd be no IDW if not for Jordan. I'm convinced of that. Not to take anything away from any of the other individuals. Many of them have their own solid careers and missions, as it were, in their own right. But, Sam is in some ways the biggest name. Sam Harris, Joe Rogan, of course, maybe bigger name, but they do different things. Ben Shapiro has his politics. A bunch of the other individuals, they'd be, minor Twitter celebrities with, followers in the hundreds of thousands, perhaps, which is a really big deal. But there'd be no IDW if not for Jordan. In 2017, 2018, there was real buzz around him. To have what David Brooks say about Jordan, what he did, and just Sid Helema in my denomination, who I did a couple of conversations with, a director of the Office of Faith Formation. He was a university professor at Dordt College and at now Dordt University, and now at not Regent, but Redeemer University in the Toronto area, and working for the denomination. And I talked to Sid, and in a lot of ways, a lot of Sid's own ideas, further to the left of me in the denomination in some ways. Sid had nothing to gain, had a lot to lose, in fact, by saying the kinds of things about Jordan Peterson that he did. And Sid is a man of, in my opinion, of utmost integrity. And Sid talked about going to a Jordan Peterson event in Toronto and just the buzz that was there. Toronto or Western Michigan, I don't remember, but that was my experience as well. And that was a significant wave. That was a significant moment in the culture. Whether it will have lasting impact, well, I suspect it will. And the book tour was remarkable. I complain about the do thought decadence of it. A little too repetitious. There were some issues there in terms of, some things that Dave Rubin would often open it in a way to get the crowd going in some ways that I thought weren't best for the movement, but we've all got our own opinions. The biblical series changed lives. I remember when I was preparing for the Australia talks that I gave, and recognizing how many of the conversations that I had gone through and how many people testified to the improvement of their lives watching those videos. And again, you call him a grifter. He gave those videos away free on YouTube, didn't monetize them. And in the early days, YouTube would have easily allowed him to monetize them, and that could have been a significant source of income. Didn't monetize them, let all of the little clip people do their things. Now, again, in hindsight, you might say, well, all of that, just added to his popularity, but, no way to know that. And so, the grifter thing just never has really stuck with me. We're getting a little far away from it now that there's enough of a fear of some hagiography going on that we romanticize the moment and romanticize it, but it was a really big deal. And there today, and this has been a theme in a number of my videos, I've been spending more time looking at Eric Weinstein's work and Brett Weinstein's work. Eric's particularly lately, as he's really upped his visibility, and I think has his Portal podcast is doing some significant work. And I've some of the more recent episodes, particularly with Ross Douthat and JD Vance, I thought have been really quite good. And I haven't listened to all of them yet. There's some other ones with some names I didn't recognize. But there remains a gap in terms of what I would say would be the spiritual aspect of the Jordan Peterson moment. Shapiro is too political. When Ben Shapiro talks, the politics, it's hard to divorce him sufficiently from the politics, just in terms of the way that he's created his public persona. Could Bishop Barron step into that gap? Bishop Barron has high status. He's certainly got the academic and the intellectual chops, but he's, you look at someone like Jonathan Haidt too. Jonathan Haidt, deep respect for Jonathan Haidt. and more, I think Jonathan Haidt does better than any of the members of the IDW in terms of talking as a non-religious person respectfully about religion. But Bishop Barron's got his niche, and Jonathan Haidt has his niche, and it was the willingness to go a bit off the reservation that let Peterson do what he does. And again, Eric is doing some of that, but I don't see Eric really filling those shoes. Jordan Peterson outside the church didn't scare away skeptics, but unsettled other skeptics in just the right way. And that mixture, I don't know if we'll find in anybody else. And so I think that's why this tweet just, really grabbed a bunch of people sort of in the gut. And that's why it struck a nerve. And I often talk about the first Jordan Peterson wave from Bill 16, October 2016 to really summer 2019 when the the resolution of at least the emergency over his wife's medical condition, and then the attempt to withdraw from this drug himself. So we're in the trough right now. And might there be a second wave? Maybe. The time is different. I mean, October 2016, that was coinciding with the election of Donald Trump. And the election of Donald Trump, whatever you think of his presidency, whatever you think of Donald Trump, that was a pretty significant moment for I think the left that imagined we had arrived at the end of history. And the election of Donald Trump basically signaled, no, we don't know the future. Yes, the future is going to be far scarier than we can imagine. And it'll be interesting looking back on the Donald Trump presidency with a few decades. Right now, a lot of my videos, I'm paying much more attention to the Cold War. And the Cold War is getting sufficiently in our rearview mirror that maybe now we can gain some perspective on it. And the last video, the video that I put out yesterday, the Unnecessary Pastor of the IDW video, Julian made, I thought, a really insightful comment on that video. So I pinned it to the top of the video about we're only now, I think in some ways, really beginning to appreciate what happened in the Cold War with respect to how we used God, the idea of God, Christianity, and the role that it played, which in some ways set up the counterculture in the 60s. And those of you who saw my conversation with Tom Holland, I'm very excited for Tom Holland to do some work in that area, and I've just always got so many books that I'm working on right now. But these are a lot of the things that are going through my mind. I'm finding Eric a lot of fun right now and helpful in terms of what he's doing, but I really don't think he will be able to do what Jordan did. So I decided to kind of make an open letter video of pastoral advice to Jordan Peterson. I don't know that Jordan will see it. The only video that I know Jordan saw, or at least paid any attention to, was the one I did on The Office. That was fairly early on. He tweeted it out. And Jordan Peterson, that's where I learned that the different social medias are really silos. Just because if you get tweeted on one thing doesn't mean a video is necessarily going to get a big jump. So I thought now, again, whether or not Jordan sees this, I have no inside information. I don't have a personal relationship with Jordan. I want to say that off the bat. I know because I've done a lot of videos about him and, shaking his hand at some of these events and, had some very, very brief correspondence and interchanges with him. In most cases, nothing longer than a tweet or two. So I have no inside information about his health or what he's working on or anything like that. I want to say that all up front so that nobody tries to read anything into this, because there's nothing I'm working on except what is publicly available out there in terms of his videos and just the conversation on Twitter and on the Discord server and so on and so forth, because usually when something's out, people run it to me quickly so I can take a look at it. So this is an open pastoral letter of sorts. And again, as to Jordan, I've got nothing but every time I'd shake his hands, I'd say thank you, because his work and the work he stirred up, the communities he stirred up, gave me nothing but opportunity, and over the last few years have provided for me some of the richest learning communities I could ever want. And the Bridges of Meaning Discord server, the comment section in my YouTube channel, the local meetups, the correspondence that I'm sent. I've just been richly, deeply blessed by what Jordan stirred up and the kinds of people that I've come into contact with. So what Jordan Peterson has done for me has been nothing but blessing. And for this, I owe him a debt of thanks and appreciation. It doesn't mean I don't critique his ideas or some of his decisions or what he does, and you'll hear some of that critique in this open pastoral letter, but that's how I feel about it. And if you do stuff on YouTube or Twitter or any place on social media, you're before the court of public opinion, and people have their ideas. So, first piece of advice, take all the time you need to get well. Just take your time. No rush to get back. Wave number 1 made him financially secure, as what Rogan and Eric Weinstein calls as FU money. He seems to be a guy on the thrifty side of things anyway, for the most part. Spend time with your family. Get lots of rest. Figure out a stable, sustainable diet, exercise. Find some good doctors that you trust, and just get physically well. And of course, Jordan over the years has been nothing but transparent about his own struggles with immune deficiency, with mood disorders and the like. So Jordan is a year older than I am. Just do what you can to get well, and take care of your wife, who it seems quite clear to me you deeply love, and your children, and your I think he's got one grandchild, and the friends around you. Take time to value these people in your life. And then, as strength permits, get back into a reliable flow state mix. So what do I mean about that? If you do the kind of work that has a lot of mental stuff, over the years you begin to learn kind of the mix of habits you need to do it. And as a pastor, I've learned this too. Too much time in the office, or too much time just talking with people, or I need a mix of all the various elements to really stay healthy and productive. Everybody has their own mix. Some are more bent towards being bookworms. Some need the right mixture of practitioner, reflector. And, I know it would be really hard for him to once again take on clients, and I don't know what would be good for him. But the right atmosphere, the right mixtures, the right conversational partners. A lot of Jordan's work he did, with graduate students, and maybe that's a piece of it. I don't know. Does he need a university setting? Hire the staff you need. I mean, again, he should be able to, he should have the income stream sufficient to, hire the staff that he needs, and, don't use family too much. It's difficult working professionally if the people around you are your family members that have kind of been co-opted into more professional tasks. So again, it's just my opinion. I don't know. Finish that 12 Rules for Life sequel. Maybe call it 12 Rules for Death. That was brought up. I think it was Joey's idea or someone's idea in the local meetup. Now you can't use it, I guess, perhaps. But don't be decadent in the Douthit's sense of decadence. Use the trough. Use what you learned in the trough. Part of what made 12 Rules really work, I think, was, particularly the last sections of the book, where he was quite open and transparent about a father dealing with the medical situation of his daughter. The more Jordan reaches into his own life generally and his own life experience, the better his anecdotes, the better the storyteller. Again, a lot of this stuff came through in his videos, his Maps of Meaning videos, a lot of the stuff before C16. So get the marketers off your back. These people will use him and they will spend him to make money off him. So, get the right publicist who will manage that. So, Jordan is still in his 50s, relatively young man. He needs to be thinking about the next 10 to 20 years of his career. And at this age, that means something sustainable, something that can work over the long time, not a quick money grab. Do a reasonable book tour next time. That's probably really a book tour. The last one was sort of an evangelistic crusade, cult of personality that was marred by sort of the suck of American political stuff going on, and I think the decadence of the marketers. It would be very difficult to do, but figure out how to balance what to say yes to, what to say no to, and maybe he's the kind of guy that needs the crowd in a sustainable way. So figure out how to get that in a sustainable way. Let a book tour be a book tour. If you're going to do something else creative that involves touring, make it sustainable. And be anti-grift. One of the real question marks that came up in Wave 1 was this MBA with the Acton School of Business. And, someone I had spoken to a couple of times had been one of the fellows. And, they were promised all of this FaceTime and close working with Jordan. And it pretty quickly seemed like that was never really in the cards. Jordan's going to have to sit down and, because of the amounts of demands on him and his age, make an assessment of where his priorities should be. And he's probably going to need someone to walk, someone he really trusts, to sit down and talk that through. And then I'll get to my last point when I get there. But be careful about money-making enterprises that wish to use your name or sell your attention. We've all got 24 hours in a day. We've all got to sleep. We've all got to eat. We've all got to maintain our relationships with our loved ones. One person can only go so far. Figure out the balance. Figure out the mixes. And he sets a high standard. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. In some ways, a lot of his credibility is based on him, being anti-grift with a lot of these things. Hold, hard as it is, hold space at a status level like his. Hard as it is, hold space for the randos. And, lots of stories of people who'd come up to him and want to shake his hand on the street in Toronto, or when he'd go on tour. The guy got seriously famous. And again, all the stories that would come back to me were that he was nothing but generous and gracious with his time. To a certain degree, you hit a level of status, you got to figure out how to manage that. Even the pastors of small churches have to figure out how to manage these things. So be anti-grift. This is the book you should really be working on the sequel to, Maps of Meaning, because that is really more the seminal work of his. And I think if Jordan's going to make ongoing contributions, he's got to, in that sense, get back to the center, get back to the heart of what he cares about, where his deep anxieties are, and work on those things. Find the right platform to talk it through. If you watch his lectures, it's clear he used university classrooms and used the university setting to do some of his work. That was the context. Find the right school that can negotiate. He's into negotiation, that can negotiate the right mix after you figure out what the mix is. I would recommend looking at small religious colleges, frankly. Why? Number one, because, first of all, probably any small religious college, it'll be complicated at a religious school because most religious schools have some degree of confessional requirements on someone. So maybe you'll be an adjunct prof or a visiting prof or something like that. And it seemed he wanted to do something like that at Cambridge, and it's really a shame that in some ways that fell through, because I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if everybody needs a context in which to work. And I'm not sure just being a celebrity is a healthy one. And so for me, being a pastor of a local church keeps me real. N.T. Wright was the Bishop of Durham. Bishop Barron is a Roman Catholic bishop with a special calling. Find the right context, and I think one of the things about religious universities is that they have a certain degree of bias towards classics by virtue, if they're the right religious university, by virtue of their religious commitments. And I think especially today, when so many are throwing away the classics, finding the right small religious college might in fact be a good place. Reboot the Biblical series. Nassim Taleb he's talked at Google at a couple of times, but his talk, I don't remember which one it was, it might have been on Black Swan, asked them, if you want to do a work and have that endure, what should you talk about? Taleb basically said you should talk about the oldest thing possible. That's a brilliant insight that Taleb made. And I think part of what made the biblical series so important was that dynamic. The world's most published book, the broadest book possible, one of the oldest books possible. The Bible has proven for many people to be a continual source of refreshment. However they regard the book itself, whether they regard it with more of a religious or less of a religious perspective. One human life is too small a pool to draw from. Draw from deeper wells. You won't exhaust the Bible. You can't wear it out. You can wear other people out, but you can't wear the Bible out. And so, all of these books behind me, all biblical commentaries, the most read, the most critiqued, the most analyzed book in all of human history. You're not going to wear it out. Find the right setting to give them. The first round was in the Bader Theater in University of Toronto. Maybe that's the right center. I mean, George's going to have to figure all these things out. But let the masses come to you. I suppose you could do a tour of the biblical series. But again, you've got to think all these things through in terms of the main thing is that it seems kind of interesting in retrospect. But Bill Hybels wrote a very interesting book on leadership. Bill Hybels, pastor of Willow Creek Church in Schaumburg, Illinois, wrote a very interesting book on leadership. And one of the points in that book was he said that the pastor should spend 75% of their time on personal leadership. What does that mean? You yourself are the tool you are using. If you were a master guitarist, you would spend a lot of time making sure that your main instruments were in tip-top shape. You are your main instrument. That's what you've got to use. So set your priorities, get yourself in a good place, and then do it. I wouldn't be a pastor if I didn't tell them to go to church, but do so quietly. I think, after 2+ years of thinking about this, and especially the last video I just made, it's okay to keep your answer to the believe in God question. I think it's the answer invites, it's a kind of a nice riddle and invites people into a little bit deeper questions about who or what is God. What do we mean by that word? How are we using it? That kind of frustration and dissonance, I think, can deepen conversations. Be careful not to bless any specific tradition unless you have to or unless you want to. But again, part of Peterson's appeal was, he at least had bona fides in terms of his skepticism. The problem with being part of one particular tradition, which is what I have as a ordained minister in the Christian Reformed, Dutch Reformed tradition, Bishop Barron has in being a Roman Catholic bishop. You'll invite hundreds or thousands of years of ecumenical drama. People often want to challenge me on some of the certain aspects of Calvinism, which I don't find particularly germane necessarily to the conversations I wish to pursue. That's a liability of being wedded to a tradition. So go to church quietly. Figure out how to do that. Build relationships in a real community of people who are trying to embody Jesus. That's what going to church is actually all about. Reboot the question and answers. Why? It's a good forum for his rambling, roaming answers. It's a good place to hold space for the randos in his following. It keeps contact with people outside the status distortion field. Hierarchy, status binds and blinds. And, it sounds strange, but even being a gringo living in a very poor area of the Dominican Republic, I think Shelley from the Discord server would know exactly what I'm talking about. She lives in a poor community or she was living in a poor community in a West African nation. You become sort of a minor celebrity, and the regular rules don't apply to you, and it makes it difficult to sort of get unvarnished opinions, because whenever we interact with someone with whom there's a status differential, we can't help but have opportunities and liabilities distort the interaction. So that makes it very difficult to maintain relationships and keep an open door to randos and people who want to talk. So, reboot the question and answer. I thought that those were really good. I thought it was a good use of a couple of hours a month. And I know some people want me to start doing it. I might. We'll see. I haven't quite figured out how exactly I want to do it. Go back to the interesting conversations segment of your channel. You've got a lot of status so that you can reach a lot of interesting people. Diversify the selection. Have high and low status people. Whoever you find interesting. He's got a level of status now where the way the interview game is played is that you try to reach for higher names, so that you can sort of work your way up the ladder status-wise. Whereas I have spoken with some people with, slightly higher status on my channel. And a lot of people will say, Paul, you should talk to this person or you should talk to that person. I've been pretty reluctant to just grab for high-status people unless I've had an opportunity to get to know their work. And usually there's a real reason for me to want to talk to them other than their status, so that I'm not just climbing a ladder. And, well, someone might say, yeah, but that keeps the status of your channel low. Yeah, it's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Think about the incarnation of Jesus. Went from the highest status, you could imagine, down to the low. And there's something deeply Christian about that whole movement. Do your homework on the biggies, and I think Jordan almost always does that. At one point, I was really trying to facilitate him talking to N.T. Wright, and Jordan had N.T.'s books, and N.T. Wright would have to read Maps of Meaning, which is not a small book. Jordan would have to read about 30 times more to read N.T. Wright's work. N.T. Wright is astoundingly prolific. That conversation never happened. That's lamentable. Could be an interesting conversation. Pick a few repeaters to build long-term conversational duets. I don't know that Sam Harris is the right guy, but pick a few people, not just Rogan and Rubin, who have their own shows. I mean, you need that thing too, but Jordan has high enough status that pick a few long-term repeaters. I mean, Bishop Barron could be an excellent choice as someone who's got high status, come back and have conversations with, because again, Barron's a seriously legitimate individual. Use wise counselors. There's a lot of talk about this in kind of the heading up the wave that other people were speaking into Jordan's life and checking him, and all that talk kind of stopped. And I wonder if all that talk stopped because, again, it just became too much and the wave got too big. And I mean, who's going to be able to coach you on something like that? Because so few people have had an experience like his. But he's going to need people around him, again, whose advice he really trusts, who are wise and mature, who can speak into it. They don't always have the right answer, but if you listen to them, you'll learn from them. Discipline, pacing, people you trust that have access to your life and ear. Indispensable. We all need each other. And of course, my last point, follow Jesus. Well, Jordan's relationship with Christianity is ambiguous. But Jordan has said a number of things. You know, Christ, by definition, is the best that a man can be. Some people, we've talked about him doing Exodus. Esther says he should jump to the Gospels. That would be very interesting. Esther's a very sharp cookie, so she's worth listening to. He is, Jesus is the archetype. At least this is Jordan's framing. Of course, for me, he's the Son of God. Jesus is the archetype of the ideal human being. So be his student and do what he says to do, and follow that lamb wherever he goes. So that's it. That's my bit of pastoral advice for Jordan, whether he hears it or not. And maybe for those who are sort of following along with the Jordan story, and for those for whom a tweet like this, even completely regardless of the source of the tweet or the person of the tweet, kind of grabs you, this video is for you.